The Sixers have an emergency team meeting after starting 2-11 where Joel Embiid gets called out by his teammates. De'Aaron Fox makes NBA history and a preview of the biggest game of the season so far. All of that and more in this week's edition of NBA News. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. If you're over on YouTube, go in and subscribe to the channel and drop a like. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience, this is available over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is coming out a day late, sorry about that, but we are getting right into the news. First things first, let's talk about our main story, which is that the Philadelphia 76ers are an absolute disaster. They have started the season with a 2-11 record. They have just lost 4 games in a row, and their new addition, Paul George, has not looked good. We've gotten very little of Joel Embiid, and when we have, he has not looked good in particular. Tyrese Maxey has had way too much of an offensive burden, which has resulted in him having an extremely inefficient season. And, well, there is one positive. Jared McCain has looked like maybe the rookie of the year thus far. If he continues the pace that he's on, will absolutely run away with that award, given that this is not a particularly impressive draft class. However, it's reaching a point where are we worried about their ability to turn the season around? Because obviously we knew they weren't going to start super strong, given that Embiid and Paul George were going to miss a good amount of time. This is not a particularly deep roster. This is a roster that has a lot of its success invested directly in its 2 highest paid players. So if they're not going to be there, naturally things are not going to work all too well. Now, a big problem, unfortunately, is that Paul George has very much not looked like the player he has in previous years with this team thus far. Now, it makes sense that there would be some time where he needs to adjust to things. That's naturally how this goes. However, his very, very poor shooting is something that becomes less tolerable when you contextualize it into how ugly this season has been thus far. They played their first game together on night 1 of a back-to-back versus New York a week ago, and they did not win that game. They both rested on that second night. Embiid, 35% from the field in his first 3 games. Paul George, 40% in his first 7 games. As I mentioned, Jared McCain's been awesome. For his last 6 games, he's averaging 25 points per game, shooting 10 threes a game on 44%. Now, that is a level of hot shooting that I especially don't anticipate holding up for a rookie. However, if there is a singular silver lining for what otherwise has been a complete disaster of a season for the Sixers thus far, it is that Jared McCain looks so good that we might be talking about a team with 4 star level players rather than 3. Or maybe it becomes 3 and it turns out Paul George really isn't in that star category anymore. But in a best case scenario, if you're feeling very positive, that could end up being what it looks like. They lost the other night against the Miami Heat, who are not doing all that great themselves and not exactly an outstanding team, but they beat the shit out of them, 106-89, 89 points for a team that has this much offensive firepower with Embiid, George, and McCain on the floor it's just sad. There was no Tyrese Maxey, so that obviously knocks them down a peg, but they are in trouble, and there seems to be some drama happening behind the scenes. Can you believe it? The Philadelphia 76ers of all teams have some drama behind the scenes? That's never happened before. So let me real quick just read this little snippet from the article from Shams, because Kyle Lowry decided to call a team meeting after this loss to the Miami Heat, and Tyrese Maxey decided to hold Joel Embiid accountable for some of his shortcomings. The loss of the Heat was the 4th in a row for the 76ers, sparking veteran guard Kyle Lowry to call for the meeting, a much-needed heart-to-heart to call to action and urgency, sources told ESPN, in which both players and coaches held each other accountable and took fault in their start to the season. In the meeting, Maxey challenged Embiid to be on time to team activities, calling out the former league MVP about being late for everything and how it impacts the locker room, from other players to the coaching staff, sources briefed on the meeting told ESPN. Maxey and Embiid have a close friendship and have a history of holding each other accountable, according to those around the team. Tyrese loves the big fella, but this is the elephant in the room, a person involved in the meeting told ESPN. Players told 76ers coach Nick Nurse that they wanted to be coached harder, and coach in turn said that they wanted players to practice with purpose and attention to detail. Embiid accepted these messages sent in the meeting, sources said, but he stated he is confused about what the Sixers are attempting to execute sometimes on the court. So there's a lot of that there. Honestly, the first thing that stands out to me, who the fuck is telling Shams this? I feel like this is something that should be close to the chest for your franchise. He specifically cites that he has a source involved in the meeting. Literally the next day, the first thing I'd be thinking is, all right, who needs to be fired? Because this is some shit that needs to stay in-house. Stuff like this happens a lot. And it isn't a story more often than not, but Joel Embiid, who is already not exactly killing it in the PR department right now has this other huge negative coming across, and I think that's another distraction added to this whole situation that could have been avoided if someone shut their fucking mouth. But that aside, as to what the actual issue is here about Joel Embiid showing up late to things, obviously you don't want to do that, especially given that you're the highest paid player on the team. You're the reason that this team will ever find any success if it does, and you need to lead by example. I'm not really going to be too critical on this front because I'm not exactly good at being on time to things either, but to be honest, I would be if I was making $60 million a year. That's just me. And also the fact that Joel Embiid seems confused about exactly what their offensive game plan is, that's a huge problem. Obviously, with the addition of Paul George and now Jared McCain having such a significant role on the offensive end, this is a different context for this roster than what he has dealt with historically, what he dealt with last year with Nick Nurse. And for that reason, I understand why some of this confusion would be happening, but that confusion is something that really should have been ironed out in the preseason. Should have been ironed out in training camp and at least finally ironed out by the preseason. But of course, we got none of that. A big part of that is, of course, that Joel Embiid has not spent a lot of time on the floor, and this team is developing tendencies built around shit that has nothing to do with Joel Embiid, and that is naturally going to make things awkward. So injuries were a concern, and injuries are, of course, the biggest reason why this is a story to begin with. They would probably be doing fine if Joel Embiid entered the season healthy, if Paul George entered the season healthy, and so on. However, I don't know how much more they can dig this hole before they can no longer get out of it. Like, if they keep losing games and this record gets to the point where they're the bottom seed in the East and more teams are slowly creeping up, because a lot of teams have struggled to start the season and they've slowly but surely been creeping their way back up, especially in the Eastern Conference. That was the most recent pod clip, was all about how the East kind of sucks. So if you want to check that out, it's the most recent upload on this channel. However, I think there is a lot of reason to be concerned. Even if there are a lot of excuses you can give here, I think we have historically found excuses for this franchise, and every time they don't end up living up to or deserving any of those excuses. So on that front, I am very, very concerned for the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know how much longer they can continue to lose games before they end up having to fight for a play-in spot to get into the postseason. And, you know, Embiid sitting out back-to-backs and things like that isn't going to end up fucking mattering if you don't end up making the postseason at all. Real quick, I do also want to specifically call out Paul George. They paid you a lot of money, my guy. You need to be better than this. And if he's not, if it turns out Paul George is just washed and he managed to cash in a giant payday right before it was revealed that he was washed, the Sixers are fucked. They are fucked. Joel Embiid is going to be on a different team in a couple of years. So there is a lot riding on Paul George not being washed. So that's honestly my bigger concern than anything else. But yeah, Joel Embiid could definitely be doing his job better, and it would make a big difference. Moving on, let's just cover a couple of games from last night. Gary Payton II got a final three-point shot versus the Clippers off of an offensive rebound after Curry missed one with a couple of seconds left. Not exactly the shot you want to get because he's not the strongest shooter in the world. Decent look, but did not go in. Sacramento, missing Sabonis, lost a game to the Atlanta Hawks. Anthony Black also had 20 points for the Orlando Magic, which was nearly a career high. Dame Time hit a game winner with 4 seconds remaining, giving Milwaukee now a 5-9 record. As I previously mentioned with the Sixers in the Eastern Conference, a couple of these teams that started off slowly creeping up. I believe they've won 2 out of the last 3 games, so the Bucks are looking better. They won that game against the Pistons, and then with Dame back, they've won this game as well. Also cool that we're getting a game winner that wasn't ruled a travel after the fact, because Jason Tatum's game winner, I think, was against Toronto. That was ruled a travel after the fact by the refs. And then the same thing happened with Julius Randle's game winner against the Phoenix Suns, where he allegedly pushed off Josh Okogie. I think that was more of a flop, but one way or the other, he still traveled after that. So nice that we get a game winner that was actually legitimate. With that said, Hallie had a bad game. He shot 28% from the field, and RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl were both fantastic, scoring 69 points combined. RJ is a pretty strong candidate for most improved player, as he has been electric so far this year with Toronto. Cat and Brunson combined for 50 points in 54 minutes on 29 field goal attempts, absolutely decimating the Washington Wizards. It's actually been kind of hard to get a good game from the both of them in the same game, so though it is the Washington Wizards, it is nice to see that they managed to do that finally. I could not believe my luck when I turned on this game, Sacramento Kings versus Timberwolves, because I wanted to watch the Timberwolves as they have been struggling, and I thought about making a video about them. They have since won their last 2 or 3 games, so I'm maybe not hitting the panic button for them quite yet. But in that game, De'Aaron Fox managed to score 60 points in a loss, which absolutely sucks. There was no DeMar DeRozan, so he was incentivized to shoot the ball even more, obviously. I also want to note that Keon Ellis had a game last night where he hit 9 3-pointers. Hopefully that's enough that the Kings will start playing him more, because that has been one of the more perplexing rotation decisions across the league to me, because as far as I'm concerned, he should very easily be the starting 2 on that team. But he also dropped 49 points versus the Jazz. Luckily, that one was a win, but that means he scored 109 points over 2 games on back-to-back nights, and only Kobe scored more points than that in back-to-back nights in the last 50 years, scoring 110 in 2007. So we're talking about a historic scoring stretch. I'm interested to see, I don't remember what minutes De'Aaron played, but I wonder what his points per minute was, and then how you could compare that to like Wilt's 100-point game. Obviously Wilt would be higher, but 48 full minutes versus like, let's say 65, whatever it would be in totality. I don't know, it'd be interesting. Anyways, he gets Player of the Week for the Western Conference, despite the fact that his team only went 500, but Franz Wagner and the Orlando Magic have been winning non-stop lately, and this is without Paolo Banchero. Now, a big hindrance to me for Franz, and the reason I have not been the highest on him, is just that I don't really think he's a super strong fit alongside Paolo. But to be honest, I'm not all that shocked. 31 points per game. That's a little bit higher than I would have guessed he was capable of. However, given that there really isn't any other strong offensive option on the floor, I guess it shouldn't be all that surprising. What's more surprising is that he's done it with the efficiency that he has, and that they have won their games in spite of the fact that they're missing, at least ostensibly their best player. There's been a lot of people arguing that Franz might actually be their best player after this, which is unfortunate because I don't really think him and Paolo fit together all that well. So that might be, honestly, it could be, if on the positive end of things, this could be like the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum type situation, where it's like, yeah, their games don't really complement each other, but maybe you put the pieces around them that overall the talent outweighs that awkward fit. But I am concerned that maybe we will come to a crossroads with those two where maybe they end up needing to be traded. Now, the both of them hitting their 3-pointers this season has been very massive, and that does help quite a bit. He has been hitting his 3-pointers about 37% so far on the year. Paulo is hitting his before he got injured. So if that maintains, I didn't mean to like turn this immediately into a who's gonna get traded, but like Franz is fucking good. That's the point I'm getting at. I had no doubts about him doing literally anything inside the arc. That doesn't surprise me that he's capable of that. It doesn't surprise me that he's been an elite defender. Actually, statistically, he's been one of the best wing defenders of all time so far this year, shouldering a huge load on the offensive end and more than handling it. Better than I thought he was, but the fact that he's also hitting his 3-pointers and then he's even further elevating his game inside the arc, you got a lot of reason to be excited as an Orlando Magic fan, because I think Franz is very much proving right here that he is a legitimate all-star level talent. Maybe not right this second, maybe this is just a streak and he'll build upon this further, but one way or the other, I mean, he's not even been playing just like an all-star, he's been playing like an all-NBA player, and you have to factor in, of course, that the Eastern Conference standings, the Orlando Magic are the 3rd seed right now. They're only 1 game ahead of the New York Knicks, so it's not by like some substantial margin, but yeah, this has been an all-NBA level season thus far for Franz. Is that going to hold up? Is he going to make that by the end of the year? I seriously doubt it, but I do want to give him his flowers for how good he has been. The Cavs remain undefeated, and they face the Boston Celtics tonight, which could be the game that ends up ending this streak. However, if they do not lose this game, we're probably going to see a 20+ win to 0 loss start. So far, they're the 4th team in history to start a season 15-0. Only 1 team of those 4 has actually won a championship, which is actually really interesting. But they face the Celtics tonight, the first game in nearly 29 years between the defending NBA champion and an opponent on a winning streak of 15 or more games. The most recent such matchup was on January 30th, 1996, when the Chicago Bulls entered on a 15-game win streak and defeated the defending NBA champion Houston Rockets 98-87. Also an NBA Cup game, so that just adds another level of flavor to this. I'm gonna be watching. I think you should be watching, because if Cleveland beats Boston, like to this point, they've had good matchups, but they haven't faced anybody that particularly terrifying. That is largely because the Eastern Conference has been so poo-poo, and they've only got to face a couple of Western Conference teams. I know they beat the shit out of the Golden State Warriors, who have been really good, but this is the proving grounds game. This is the game where if they win it, we're gonna have to start being more serious about the conversations we are having. I have already said they're a contender. I've already said I think they're probably the 2nd best team in the East. I'm still giving the Bucks a little bit of leeway, the Sixers a little bit of leeway, and the Knicks quite a bit of leeway to actually potentially be that 2nd best team. But I see no reason to doubt this Cavs team. Like, there's the fact that their best player is a little undersized. I don't really think that's a huge issue. They have the double big stuff, which could come with its own offensive woes. But even though that can still be a limiting factor, I think the fact that Mobley has been a more active and engaged offensive player, on top of the fact that everybody else is shooting the lights out of the ball, makes up for that difference, and more than makes it worth the defensive impact that having both Mobley and Allen on the floor together does. So yeah, big game for the Cavs. Watch that one. If you haven't watched a game recently, I think this is the one to watch for sure. LaMelo Ball fined $100,000 because he said no homo during a post-game press conference on the 16th, apologized the following day. What was the specific quote? Because it wasn't even like an obvious no homo situation.
Everyone was underneath the basket for that rebound.
You said that last play when he took the shot? Yeah, we loaded up. No homo. That's what we wanted. Put the hand up and then live with the results. Yeah, we loaded up. No homo. Yeah, we loaded up. No homo.
Yeah, LaMelo is not someone who has much of a filter, and sometimes that can be endearing. Unfortunately, homophobia is very prevalent in the NBA space, both among players and among the fan base. I'm sure you'll get a decent amount of comments on this video that directly reflect that, for me considering this to even be a problem. The no homo thing is so immature, and it's so middle school, and it's like also so like, man, you can't just say something that could vaguely be a sexual innuendo about a man without clarifying, hey, I'm no homosexual. Whatever, man. It was stupid. Said he was very apologetic, but you know, I don't know. More often than not, just don't do that. Just don't do it, especially if you're gonna get a $100,000 fine for it. Dyson Daniels, the Great Barrier Thief, one of my favorite nicknames in a while, averaging 3.4 steals a game, which leads the NBA. He averaged 1.7 last year and 0.7 in his rookie season prior to that, according to Fast Break. I'm not sure who that is, but I'm sure. Fast Break Breakfast. Why does it just say that there? Ah, I see. Yeah, I know them. Whatever. There are only 19 players who have averaged more than 2.9 deflections per game. Meanwhile, Dyson Daniels, first in the NBA, averages 2.9 deflections per game, more than the guys tied for second. What? Oh wait, averages 2.9 More. Okay, I misread that. It was like, that is 2.9 is just more than second place. No shit. Okay. Yeah, no, he's averaging 2.9 more than the next best ranking in that category. He has been a demon on the defensive end, not to mention that his offense has been pretty good. That was a rather significant concern, was that the reason he had not really seen much playtime to this point is that his offense hasn't been great. Yeah, Dyson Daniels really good, probably going to make an all-defensive team at this rate. He's also averaging the most stocks by a guard since Michael Jordan in his DPOY season. So that's pretty good, I would say. So yeah, shout out to Dyson Daniels. Inside the NBA stays alive. God damn it. I have been inside the NBA's biggest hater for a while. This kind of brings up a conversation that Brian Windhorst has been having lately about NBA media. That's been a big talking point lately on Twitter. It's just, he says NBA media is not in a great place because we're devaluing things that help build the league up. I would say let's lead storytelling instead of following. Instead of following the crowd, let's lead and try to get the crowd. Yeah, I do think there's an excellent video Kofi just put up talking about this subject, where he said something along the lines of like, the difference on sports media has largely been, you know, the age of the internet, being that, you know, previously if you were going to write an article and it was going to be in a newspaper, you weren't going to get a large page of statistics about who read which article. You put the story forward and then the people either consumed that story or they didn't, but the media was the one kind of shaping the direction of the discourse. Meanwhile, now it seems like the discourse is following, and the media's influence on that discourse is rather reacting to what NBA fans want or are seeming to want, rather than shaping what those NBA fans would want. Which I think that's for the better, because frankly, NBA fans want and care about a lot of stupid and annoying shit. And I personally hate having to cater to it all the time, but I gotta keep the lights on, so it is the way that it works. As for Inside the NBA in general, it's going to be produced by TNT and air on ESPN/ABC, so it's still going to exist. It's not going to be, I don't think, the NBA's outright, what's the term I'm looking for? I don't think it's gonna be like the NBA's direct broadcast. So they're not going to be at the forefront of things directly anymore, but it still exists as something you can access. To me, that is a compromise that I can tolerate, because I've obviously been a big Inside the NBA hater for a while. I know they're funny. I know they're entertaining. You are not giving me new information by saying that. Every single time I complain about this is like, you're missing the point. They're just there to be entertaining. No, I recognize they're just there to be entertaining. That's why it bothers me, because I do think it is important to have guys with some level of insight. And, you know, if they're just there to be entertaining, then only ask them to do that, not then ask them to give their insight. And their insights usually dog shit, completely washed in a bias from a bygone era of the NBA. Fucking Charles Barkley and especially Shaquille O'Neal were arguing that Joel Embiid was not a physical player, that he wasn't someone who got hacked a lot. What are you talking about? He objectively is. There was just this, I can't stand it. I really can't stand when they actually try to analyze the game, because there is never a single thing that comes out of their fucking mouth that is not immediately correlated to how they think the game should be based on what the game was 30 odd years ago. So I'm glad that it exists for the people who want to enjoy it, but I also am very glad that it is not going to be essentially the only thing that a large majority of NBA fans get on the broadcast in terms of analysis and in terms of understanding the game. Like, having 4 dudes, or really 3 dudes. Ernie Johnson never really says anything that disrespectful about the modern game, but the rest of them, and especially Charles and Shaq, I just think it devalues your product, because if I'm a casual fan tuning into an NBA game and the people on the broadcast are like, wow, this sucks, then I'm gonna be like, all right, why am I watching it then? I'm not gonna. I'm gonna turn on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Anyways, Inside the NBA is alive, but not in a way that is as annoying to me as it otherwise would be. Shaq is apparently also not under contract for the next season, so there is a chance that he won't actually be a part of it. At that point, I think it kind of ceases to be inside the NBA and just becomes a different show entirely. But yeah, that's a factor here. James Harden passes Ray Allen. Dude, I saw a bunch of fucking dork-ass James Harden fans on Twitter who were like, why isn't this being celebrated as much as when Steph passed Ray Allen? Because Steph passed Ray Allen for first place, not second place. It's not the same fucking thing just because we're not gonna do a huge celebration every time someone passes Ray Allen. Because guess what? A bunch of fucking people are gonna pass Ray Allen, and it's not gonna be the same as the first time it happened. So on that front, congratulations to James Harden. I have argued that James Harden is a historically underrated three-point shooter because his percentages are never outstanding, because he is almost exclusively an off-the-dribble three-point shooter. That has been less so the case over recent years. However, historically, that is very much the case, and it means that he has seasons where he's at like 35%, but he ends up being one of the most prolific high-volume three-point shooters of all time, literally second behind Stephen Curry, where James literally said in an interview, like, I don't count Stephen Curry, I'm first place. And then there's Stephen Curry, who just set this ridiculous level of standard that just no human being is going to be able to accomplish, at least not for a very, very long time. But yeah, James Harden, one of the greatest three-point shooters of all time. Not a catch and shoot guy, so he has this weird dichotomy where like you compare his percentage to a lot of the other guys high on that list and it's much lower, but one of the best pull-up three-point shooters of all time. I would say he's literally second only to Stephen Curry, maybe Damian Lillard too. Anyways, moving on. Warriors versus Mavericks. We got to see Klay return to Golden State, got an awesome tribute video, was a very tight game, and then Steph hit a huge shot to put the Warriors up. Then the Mavericks got one and the Warriors got one more, and the Warriors would win 120 to 117. Curry had a massive celebration that was awesome. Dude, the sweat just won't stop. Can you bring that fan over here? Do not make fun of me for sweating. I'm on a medication, all right? It makes me sweat excessively for nothing. It's the worst. You people make fun of me in the comments. I'm just trying to improve myself. Some more impressive performances you might have missed. Tyler Hero dropped 40 points, hit 10 three-pointers on the Denver Nuggets. LeBron has been on a triple-double streak and just had a massive one against the Grizzlies with 35, 12, and 14. I'm going to continue to emphasize this every time he pops up. Why is he still here? Why is this still happening? I did not think when I started covering the game when I was 16 that I would still be talking about LeBron James having 35, 12, and 14 when I'm 24, almost 25. Jordan Poole had 42 points against the Spurs in the game that Wemby had 50. Star J gets first career triple-double in an overtime loss versus Boston with 25, 12, and 10. Jakob Poeltl also having 35 points on 16 for 19 shooting. Yeah, these are all just like some major performances I did not cover in the NBA had a crazy night video or whatever the fuck that's called. So if you want to hear about the Wemby performance, the Cat performance, the Giannis 59 piece, you can check that video out. The Kings have a new mascot and he looks horny. His name is Royale. And that's it. Thank you very much to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.